this happens in politics. I mean, Peter Mandelson had more comebacks than Frank Sinatra. So, I think these things do happen. Some people go back into roles. Some people aren't in roles very long. It is very fast moving politics. I mean, there's been a number of education secretaries. I'm aware of that. So it is fast moving. That's not always something that we welcome, but it is the nature of the beast sometimes.
Right. Rishi Sunak accepted Gavin Williamson's resignation with what he described as great sadness. The departure came after a string of allegations. There were the sweary text messages to get a seat at the Queen's funeral. His deputy, when chief whip, said he used information as leverage on colleagues. And a senior civil servant said Williamson told them to slit their throat. So should Rishi Sunak be sad this morning? Gillian Keegan is the Education Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Asma.
Now, Rishi Sunak says he's sad about Gavin Williamson resigning. Are you sad?
Well, I think it's always sad when a colleague resigns. I mean, it does have an impact on them personally, it has an impact on their family. So, nobody takes glee out of these situations at all. It is always sad, but it does happen in politics. It happens quite a lot in politics, actually.
Yeah, the senior civil servant who was apparently told by Williamson to go and slit their throat, that had an impact on them too.
Of course it did, and that will be for the investigators, the independent investigators. I mean, to look at that. I mean, Gavin is denying those allegations or mischaracterization, I think he said. But, clearly it was becoming a distraction. So I think it's the right thing, because we do have some serious things that we need to get on with as a government, not just navigating the economic challenges, global economic challenges that we have, but also, still managing to support Ukraine in their war against Russia.
Well, there are a huge amount of educational challenges as well. He was Education Secretary, you're Education Secretary. We'll get to that in a second. You say it was becoming a distraction, and he said that too. But, it didn't really need to become a distraction, did it? This is someone who had been fired twice. Why do you think, if you were Prime Minister, do you think you would appoint someone who'd been fired twice?
Well, this happens in politics. Peter Mandelson had more comebacks than Frank Sinatra. So, I think these things do happen. Some people go back into roles. Some people aren't in roles very long. It is very fast moving politics. There's been a number of education secretaries. I'm aware of that. So it is fast moving. That's not always something that we welcome, but it is the nature of the beast sometimes.
Right. Dominic Grieve, former Attorney General, told us that he wouldn't actually employ Sir Gavin Williamson, which goes to the question I just asked. Let me just read what he said. I myself wouldn't employ Gavin Williamson in any capacity whatsoever, because he has a long track record of, firstly, incompetence, and secondly, unpleasant behaviour. There's nothing new in this. It's just that the behaviour towards Wendy Morton was particularly deplorable. That's pretty damning, isn't it?
Well, I think Gavin actually apologised for his comments and remarks on the text message to Wendy, and it is absolutely unacceptable. And he did apologise for that. I guess everybody's going to have their views. People bring different talents at different points in different times. Dominic himself has been in the cabinet at times of his journey as well, and now is no longer in politics.
Now, for a few months, you were a minister in the Education Department when Gavin Williamson was Education Secretary. I think I'm right in saying that. What was he like to work for?
Well, I was there for nearly about 19-20 months, actually. I got on with him absolutely fine. I never had any text messages that were inappropriate. I never saw him act inappropriately, to be honest. So, I had a collegiate working relationship with him. I don't know him super well. I was listening to or reading about this curry club, which I've never been invited to. But I did have a working relationship. He was the Secretary of State. I was the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister. I didn't see any signs of anything that caused me concern at the time.
Right. Now, you've said that these things happen, that people kind of come in and out of jobs and the cabinet and all the rest of it. But I think the trouble here is that we've had some pretty rocky political times. We've had 3 prime ministers this year. And we're all hoping for a kind of clean slate with Rishi Sunak. And he said that his government was going to be characterised by, amongst other things, integrity. How do these bullying allegations, and in fact appointing someone who seemed to have some questions around them, how does that fit with the promise to be a government of integrity?
Well, I mean, I think Rishi has the highest degree of integrity and judgment. I mean, we all saw his judgment on display
But
all
his
over the
judgment's not
summer.
been great on Gavin Williamson, has it?
Well, his judgment we saw on display on the big things. I mean, let's put this into perspective. On the big things, on the economy, we saw it all over the summer. He was prepared to tell the hard truths. That's real leadership when you're prepared to do that. And I think we saw that all over the summer, which is why I backed him even then. I mean, the reality is you appoint people and, you know, the only thing you can do if things don't work out or things go wrong or things come to light afterwards is act quickly. Gavin's acted quickly. He's removed the distraction, and I would expect after today that it won't be discussed any further.
Well, right, okay. Well, I mean, Gillian Keegan, Rishi Sunak knew about the allegations and he still appointed Gavin Williamson. You say his judgment's been good. On this, do you think his judgment was good? On this question, not on Ukraine or the economy, on Gavin Williamson, do you think his judgment was good?
Let's just be clear, because he didn't know about any specific concerns. He knew that there was a disagreement between two former whips. Yeah. He was aware of a disagreement between two former whips via text message. That was it. He didn't know the nature of the text. He hadn't seen the text. He didn't know any of those details. So, you know, that is the extent of his knowledge at the time, which, you know, obviously now there is an independent complaints procedure which is ongoing with more than one complaint. I mean, obviously, Gavin apologised for his text messages to Wendy Morton, which is completely right because they were unacceptable. But, you know, there are now more allegations and they will go through the independent process, which is, you know, and it's only right that we let that process continue. But none of that was around at the time when this appointment was made.
Okay, I want to talk to you about education budgets. There's a huge survey of head teachers which finds that more than half of schools in England may have to make staff redundant because of government underfunding and rising costs. This is the Head Teachers Union, the National Association of Head Teachers. We have a head teacher who we speak to on this programme quite a lot. His name is Glyn. He says that he welcomes your appointment, but please ask that she leads the charge on the rescue needed for education, which rests on a knife edge, short budgets, decline in recruitment, crumbling estate, demoralised profession and children suffering. We need a champion now. Is that champion you? And what can you do in terms of underfunding? Because if you look at what Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak are potentially planning with the statement that's coming up next week, it may be that pensions and wages, pensions and benefits are going to rise in line with inflation, but there are going to have to be cuts in departments, and that may include the education department. So what can you do to stop a bad situation, getting worse?
Well, first of all, can I just say, of course, I will always be a champion for all parts of our education sector, and schools are a massive part of that. So that definitely is my role. And we are massively grateful to teachers. You know, it's not that long ago they were dealing with the pandemic, they were dealing with new technology, they were trying to keep education going, they were trying to keep exams going, and they've done the most amazing job. And I think the thing about teaching is every single one of us will remember a teacher who's inspired us, who's changed our lives, and that's what they're doing day in, day out. Yep. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that the difficult economic times, there's a lot of uncertainty around, and, you know, inflation is one of those. That's why we've said very clearly the number one thing we have to do in the autumn statement is to tackle inflation, because without doing that, you cannot spend your way out of inflation. So without doing that, any other discussion is kind of irrelevant, because inflation will just eat up any gains. Yeah, so the number one focus is inflation.
But you can't, the number two or the number one focus should be education as well. I mean, it was very much harmed during the pandemic. I think many people would agree with that. And you can't run a school, can't operate a school with not enough teachers or teaching assistants.
Well, we have more teachers than ever. Actually, we've recruited more teachers, and we have, I think, 31,000 in teacher training at the moment.
This survey says head teachers are going to have to cut the number of hours and teaching assistants.
Well, we have, just so we're aware, there was additional £4 billion, which is actually a massive increase that we had in this spending review, which is the second biggest increase in the spending department after the NHS. And we also had additional £5 billion for education catch up. So there has been more money going into teaching, but that doesn't change the uncertainty. And I understand that. Obviously we've got the energy bill relief scheme that's there as well.
Okay.
But what this is, and I think what they're looking at is if they, and the models that they've put in place will obviously make assumptions about inflation and other things. There is no doubt all across the country, actually all across the world, organisations, whether they're hospitals, whether they're schools, whether they're businesses, whether they're households, everybody is worried about inflation, which is why the number one thing we have to do is tackle inflation.